All right, welcome back, Syd fans. It's been a while, but perhaps it's time to make a few more episodes. I got a message not long ago from Val Preston, and he was going through the old Peeling Syd series. And if you are interested in Syd Barrett, I do suggest you watch my Peeling Syd series. And he made the comment or the question, what did I think about the movie that was coming out? And I vaguely recalled a movie that was supposedly going to be made, but there's always something that's out there that's supposedly being done about Syd, so I kind of lost track of it. Anyway, I do appreciate that people go back and look through the old material and have questions or make comments because it keeps me appraised of new things. So thanks a lot for that, Val. Anyway, I had totally forgotten about the film. Have You Got It Yet? Which is, of course, based on the story of the song with Mr. Barrett kind of having a go at his bandmates and teaching them a song that's unlearnable. But they've put together a film, and it's I'm going to comment on two of the trailers. I want to discuss the movie introduction made by Roddy, and I want to discuss an interview that Roddy Bogawa made as well for the film. So I'm going to go through four of those things in this episode, and I kind of want to give you my ideas on it, my opinions, etc. So before I get started, I just want to make a note of all the individuals that were a big part of who Pink Floyd were. And they're gone. So obviously Storm Thorgerson is one. Rick Wright is one. Syd Barrett, Mick Rock is another individual that contributed a lot in his own way. And they're all gone. And so it's a little bit sad that you have these people that I feel they were trying to not just make music and make art, but they were trying to help make the world a better place. And they're gone. So, there's always new people coming in, and you hope that they'll have some folks that are the same mindset that want to make the world a better place. And I'm sure some are, and they're doing what they can. But when you see someone who made things that you really enjoyed kind of pass away, it's not an easy thing to consider. Anyway, let's go ahead. I'm going to give you clips from the trailers and give you my thoughts. So for the first trailer is the U.S. release, and I'll just say the first thing I notice is the painting of the Scream, and of course Syd had his song "Scream Thy Last Scream." He has a number of paintings that seem to correlate with songs, and I really hope somebody tries to tackle that. I tried to tackle that in my Peeling Syd series when I noticed it, but I don't have access to all of his art. He destroyed a lot of it. His family probably has a lot of the photos that are associated with his art. I don't know if they've tried to do that or not, but I really feel someone should be doing that. The next point I want to make from the U.S. release trailer is the glasses reflection. So you have Roger Waters on one side and Syd Barrett on the other. And Syd has the pink glasses and Roger Waters has the blue glasses, the blue tinted glasses. You see this a lot in photos with the band. You can tell very early on that Roger Waters and Syd are kind of opposite, somewhat together, but also opposed. And very likely, in my opinion, this is kind of what led to a lot of problems in the band, is a struggle between those two. Roger Waters, of course, founded the band. He was one of the founding members, but he was kind of the driving force behind the band before Syd came on, and then Syd came on and joined them. But Syd really was the talent. So you're going to have a struggle there. You have the slightly older guy who has a demeanor to him. Roger Waters has a look to him. He has a demeanor to him that is very kind of alpha. And Syd is not. In my opinion, Syd is what you would call a Sigma male. He's playing his own game. He's doing his own thing. And anybody that's been around those two types of personalities knows that's going to be a problem sooner or later. And I'm pretty sure it was. So the next thing I want to kind of point out is someone makes a mention of this romantic ideal.
The romantic ideal is that a creative person is drawn by something so powerful that he or she will follow that regardless of the price that has to be paid.
This idea of following something regardless of the consequences. And man, what a great quote that is. I personally really feel that's what Syd was all about. That he had this kind of a vision that maybe wasn't entirely formed, but he got turned on to this vision, this idea of making art and incorporating it into his own life and helping other people to do the same, and perhaps even guiding them through that process by example. And I don't know if he was doing that on purpose or not, but if that is what he was doing, that's a really cool thing. So a lot of people wonder, I've studied a lot of Syd. And by the way, I will be throwing in opinions in here and ideas. I have read quite a few things, so I will loosely relate to them. I will suggest that you get these 4 books if you're interested in Mr. Barrett, if you don't have them already. You can get Photos of Syd Barrett by Mick Rock. You can get Barrett by Russell Beecher and Will Schutz. You can get A Very Irregular Head by Rob Chapman, and discusses the life of Syd Barrett. And you can get Dark Globe, Syd Barrett and Pink Floyd Dark Globe by Julian Palacios. Those are the 4 books I had, and there are a lot of side books. And in my series, Peeling Syd, I try to pull in a lot of other books from the time frame, because you really need to kind of understand the culture of the time, the underground culture that was happening at the time. And I think a lot of people now, they can't. Some books that you might be interested in is the Subterraneans. You might be interested in Grapefruit by Yoko Ono. Man, there's so much to throw at you, but I think those 2 would be a good start. If you want to try and read the Subterraneans, and if you want to try and check out Grapefruit by Yoko Ono, I think that's a good start. Okay, so anyway, sorry, that was kind of a side topic there. Now, the next thing that I'll kind of point out is you can see a photo where Syd's kind of in the back of the group, and it's almost as if he knew already, and my particular opinion is he was deliberately kind of removing himself from the band. There are reasons for me to think so, such as him kind of scouting other guitarists to bring in. And yes, he was actively checking out other guitarists. You could say it was because he wanted to kind of figure out what he was going to do. Personally, I believe he was looking for someone to replace him with. And you can believe, whatever stories you want to believe. But in my opinion, Syd was a large part of the reason Dave Gilmour eventually joined the band, because they were friends for a long time. He actually was closer to Dave Gilmour than a lot of other people in the band. Okay, so the next kind of thing that I want to point out that's in the trailer is this idea of being in this kind of religious acid-taking cult and being the saint of this kind of movement.
There was religious acid-taking at that time. Syd was one of the sort of saints of that underground cult.
And this is something that I think is really undervalued by people that discuss Syd. There was kind of a religion. This is discussed in the book, The Subterraneans, and there is kind of this loose religious association with ideals of some form of Christianity, but also a lot of Eastern religions, especially stuff that's from India. So you'll see the pose of Mr. Barrett in the yoga pose and stuff. He was related to, or wanted to be a part of, the Sandmot movement, and who knows how involved he was with a lot of these things, but I appreciate that quote. I hope it's in the film. I hope they develop it to some degree. How much they will, I don't know. But I do believe that Syd was trying to, in his own way, create a kind of a rebirth of spirituality in people. And man, we could really use that right now. Just my opinion, but man, we could use that right now. Okay, the next is another photo. They show kind of the sun behind the group, and you can see the rest of the group's kind of, they just look normal. But man, you look at Syd, he's looking right through you. You look at his eyes. It's one of my favorite photos, and there are people like this that you will meet. They'll make your hair stand on end when they look at you. They're looking through you, almost like they're peering into your soul. And I never met Syd, obviously. I don't know exactly what's going on, but that photo is very revealing to me. There are people that have stories that relay this kind of feeling, that he could look through them, and it was unnerving. And of course, if you've known him, since he was just a kid in school, you might not kind of recognize that anymore because you're used to being around him. But if you only meet someone a few times, you can pick up on that. Maybe it's just a first impression thing. I don't know. But that photo is one of my favorite photos. Okay, so one of the things that I kind of want to mention is that people that are contributing, or there's a note that this is featuring David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Roger Waters. I'm a little bit concerned about that because Nick Mason didn't always like Syd, and Nick Mason is kind of a conservative guy. I'm not saying that's bad, okay? Please don't think I'm saying something bad about Nick Mason. I'm just saying Nick Mason was very practical, and he's a very conservative individual. And so you can watch the Edgerton interviews with Nick Mason. You should watch all the Edgerton interviews. If you're interested in Syd Barrett, you should watch all the Edgerton interviews. He has an extensive body of work that's related to the people of that time frame. And he interviews, one of them is with Nick Mason. And there are things that Syd was doing that Nick Mason did not like and obviously did not want to be associated with. So I don't know exactly what to make of that, but Roger Waters, man, that's a hard one. Roger Waters was a hero of mine when I was a little kid. I loved what I thought he was, and I'm not convinced anymore that he is what I thought he was. And again, I don't want to speak badly of anyone, but I will say that I've had kind of a change in my view on Roger Waters over time as I've studied the band and I've studied the group. And he's always been a very strong person. As I said, he's kind of an alpha. And he's very strong in his opinions. But I have this feeling that he does not understand things very well. Overall, Roger Waters is noted, to get back on topic, he's noted to be one of the contributors and featuring. My suggestion to you, if you watch this film, okay, and you'll have to know how to recognize the voices. I hope they give some indication during the film. Recognize, please, that David Gilmour is a much more trustworthy source when it comes to discussions on Syd Barrett than Nick Mason and Roger Waters are, because Nick Mason and Roger Waters had issues with Syd, and they're going to, even if they're well intentioned, their perception of Syd is going to be flavored, as the picture that we just discussed was, by the glasses that they're looking through. And Roger Waters was competing with Syd early on, and Nick Mason resented Syd because of the financial problems that he could have caused to the band. I mean, that they were trying to break through. They were trying to make money and become a big band. And Syd viewed it as, I don't know what Syd viewed it as. Nobody does, but it's very likely that Syd viewed it as art, and whether or not he was making money at it was not as important to him as it was to everybody else. I'll just leave it like that. Okay, so I guess that's about it for the first trailer. Let's look at the second trailer. Now, they open with the idea that David Bowie and the Jesus Mary Chain and REM recorded his songs, Syd songs, Pink Floyd songs, whatever you want to say. Okay, I mean, there's some truth to that. I don't know why they're showing that. And this is, I guess, the UK version of the trailer that's being released. I don't necessarily like that. And the reason I don't like that is because you can frame things. Like, politics and art can be heavily influenced by how you frame something to start with. Syd didn't just have songs that were recorded by other people, in my opinion. Syd vastly influenced the entire landscape of rock and roll, particularly in England and in the UK. So the idea that some other people recorded some of his songs, you have to understand David Bowie specifically asked to work with Syd Barrett. And David Bowie's not an idiot. He was an incredibly in-tune individual that was connected with a lot of artists. So why on earth would David Bowie want to work with Syd Barrett if he was crazy? You'd have to be crazy to want to work with someone that's that crazy. And don't get me wrong, David Bowie is an artist, so I think he would understand a lot of things. In my opinion, David Bowie, or David Bowie, if you want to say it, I guess the way the English folks do. But he's no fool. And he, of course, would want to work with people that would get a good product, that would be creating something worthwhile, and that he would enjoy working with. And he knew of Syd to some degree. He had, I don't know, just go watch Peeling Syd series if you want. In particular, the song The Gnome. So if you go check out Peeling Syd the Gnome, there's kind of a dynamic that goes way back between David Bowie and Syd Barrett. So the point is, in reviewing a lot of work, my question has always been, to what degree did Syd influence other bands? And did he eventually work with anybody later? Because why not? I mean, he's an artist. Do you really think an artist is going to just suddenly stop working? He made paintings almost all his life. Why would you think someone as gifted with words as he was would be happy no longer being gifted and making things with words? Why would someone who was as interested and capable on guitar as him suddenly just never use guitar again? It really doesn't make sense. So I suggest you go check out Did Syd if you want to consider those questions. Okay, so the second thing they say in that trailer is that Syd went mad and left the group.
The story was always, oh, he went mad and left the group.
So right there's an interesting thing there, right? So he went mad, which is an assumption. Not that he didn't just choose to leave, but that he went mad and he left the group. The common story is, of course, that the band kicked him out, or they just moved on without him because he was so far gone that he was no longer, usable. He's no longer feasible as a frontman or as a contributor to the band. And of course, if you studied Pink Floyd, you know already there was a plan for him to become a writer, to just kind of remove himself from the band and become a writer. You can argue that didn't happen or it wasn't feasible, and so they moved on eventually without him. But in my opinion, Dark Side of the Moon is one of the pieces that probably was heavily influenced by Syd. And you can go check out my episodes, Did Syd Barrett, Dark Side of the Moon? And there's a whole bunch of backstory on that. So did he really go mad, or did he just leave the group? And did he want to do other things? Well, we'll get a clue to that here in a little bit. The next thing I'll point out is that they show him kind of playing his mirror guitar, which I love. I wish they had some photos or something of him playing that guitar at the 14-hour Technicolor Dream. There's a big story about that and how the Pink Floyd came on and the sun was kind of rising, and the light of the sun just came off his guitar and lit up this whole area. I wish they had some video from there. I don't know what they're going to have in this movie, but I really wish they had something from there. Okay, so the next thing is they kind of say that Syd was kind of pushed out. And again, I mean, as I said, and you don't have to take my word for it. I don't think Syd was pushed out. I think Syd wanted out to some degree. He didn't really know possibly when he needed to leave, and nobody really knew exactly when he wanted to leave. And the truth is, probably a part of him maybe liked playing with the band. Probably a part of him really liked playing with the band. At any rate, the song from the Wish You Were Here album, that you wore out your welcome with random precision, that states it very clearly right there. And if you are familiar with that particular album, you know that I think that Syd probably didn't contribute very much at all to that album. So that seems to be a recollection of sorts from the members of the band, very likely from Roger Waters, that he wore out his welcome with random precision. I can't think of a better descriptor of what potentially Mr. Barrett may have been doing at that time. The next thing is they show Syd kind of slamming guitar and making string sounds, and that's really, really wonderful.
absorbing acid like he was.
But he wasn't the only one.
It reminds me so much of other musicians. Of course, there's the industrial rock movement, but also the guitarist for Audioslave and Rage Against the Machine. This, making these really strange sounds with guitar. I feel that that's one of the beautiful things about Syd, is that he would come up with these really strange ways of doing things that is more important than just being a technically proficient guitarist. I mean, what are you supposed to do? if it's just so strange that you have people that have this ideal of like what someone is supposed to be like to be a valid musician. And they can be quite judgmental about that now. So if you look at someone like Syd, who I think has a great voice, but a lot of people didn't like his voice. Okay. He writes amazing lyrics. He makes very experimental sounds on guitar. Whether or not he really wants to be participating in this, and how much does he want to be at the front? How much of it is he wants to have light shows and other things going on? How much of a person needs to be involved directly in a process for you to consider them to be valid as a musician, as a frontman? So the ideal rock and roll frontman is, of course, Jimi Hendrix. In my mind, Jimi Hendrix. He's putting on a show with guitar. Technically, no peer. The only person anyone at that time, in my mind, was comparing him to really was Clapton. But Hendrix is absurd. Who can play guitar like that? And to think like you want someone to be able to sing really good and play guitar in that way, technically that sound, and come up with these amazing songs and lyrics with wonderful melodies. It's absurd. It's really, really hard. There's not very many people that can do it. So what am I trying to get at? I'm trying to state as cleanly as I can that Syd was pretty amazing. And if someone listens just to his songs and they say, he sounds kind of funny, they're missing a lot. They're missing a lot of who he was, in my opinion. Okay, so the next kind of point I'll mention is David Gilmour, and I recognize David Gilmour's voice. It's great. He kind of says that he thinks some people have a weakness or a switch, that something can change in them forever, and they'll never really quite come back. They'll just change.
There are some people who must have a weakness of some sort, like a switch waiting to be turned, and that switch will go and they'll never quite come back.
And I think that's very, very true. As we mentioned in this kind of romantic ideal from the other trailer, there are people who have something kind of turn on, and they're just different forever. And there is an element of spirituality or religion to it, maybe. There is an element perhaps of romantic love or ideals tied to it, maybe. I don't know. I will say this, though. Syd's father was a very well-respected man. And that's a hell of a thing to live up to try to live up to. So I suspect that the nature of Syd's father, who probably was one of the very few people on the planet that could really understand Syd, who had enough knowledge of him and had enough likeness to him, that he would have perhaps comprehended Syd. Because, I mean, if someone's really, really smart, or they're smarter than you, and they don't want you to know that they're smart, how would you ever know? You know, do you know what I'm trying to say right now? I believe that they're very gifted individuals, and they're interested in making things that are beautiful, but they're not really interested in explaining them to you or me. And so we're left kind of looking at it and wondering, what really is going on. I think that is the draw that kind of hit Syd Barrett, was he wanted to make things that were amazing, like his father was doing. His father was a doctor. I believe he was a research doctor, someone who worked with, perhaps he worked with diseases or something like that. But the family's largely technical. Syd's one of the few artistic members of the family. So And it's funny that people always think those things are very separate, but in my mind, they don't have to be. They can work in concert with one another. Anyway, just some thoughts there. I do think that David Gilmour has an understanding of these things on some level. And I really, really, really wish that he would just come out with everything. I wish he would just state everything. For some reason, I always feel like he's holding back. And perhaps he's doing that out of deference to what Syd wanted. Perhaps he doesn't feel comfortable talking about these things because he doesn't know for sure. But I do think that he does know better than most. And I would like to see a lot of David Gilmour in this film. I would actually really, really like for David Gilmour to write down everything and make a book. He doesn't even have to sell it. He could put all this together in a book, and all his memories, everything, and he could donate everything to charity, whatever he wanted. But sweet Jesus, I would love to read that book. Because I really feel that David Gilmour not only has a lot of knowledge on the nature of the dynamics between all these different people, but I also think he's a very fair person, and he has an understanding of the world and of people that for some reason he's not completely sharing. As I said, he may be doing that out of deference to Syd's family. He may be doing that out of deference to Syd. Perhaps he's just too honorable to do that. But man, I would love to read that book. Anyway, the last thing I'll say about that particular trailer is Rosemary. She says Syd no longer wanted to be a pop star.
He decided that he no longer wanted to be a pop star.
There you have it. His sister, who knew him quite well and helped take care of him for like 30 years, told you in that interview right there directly that Syd wanted to be removed from the pop culture. And I mean, you have to take her at her word. Does she know it? She probably knows better than most folks what Syd wanted. And if that's kind of what he wanted, then I mean, people have to recognize that not everybody wants what they think makes sense. Sometimes people want what makes sense to them. And if Syd is interested in making art and thinking and being removed and not being distracted with society, I mean, look at all the things that distract us now in the world. It's so much worse than it was even in the 80s. This constant barrage of media, it can be so difficult to work with and be around as a human being. Imagine as an artist, you're trying to tie together all these ideas as in art, as Syd did. He's kind of famous for cutting up ideas and then reintegrating them in an interesting way. So pulling words apart, pulling apart other forms of media, and then putting it back together again in an interesting way. It's really wonderful. But, I mean, imagine trying to tie that all up in your head when you're constantly being barraged with modern media. Okay, so the next thing that I would like to discuss, that's pretty much it for my thoughts on the trailers. Other than I really want to see the movie, I'm a little bit worried about a few things, and I'll name them at the end of this video. The next is the intro of the film itself by Roddy Bogawa, who was a close friend of Storm Thorgerson and worked on Storm's movie. So, a couple things that I just want to note. First is immediately in the intro, he thanks Rosemary Breen and her family and her, I think he says their clan.
I do want to thank Rosemary Breen and the Barrett clan. I do want to thank the Thorgerson clan. I thought I saw Barbie here.
So, there's going to be a heavy element of Rosemary in this film and Syd's family. Syd's family is conservative. They are religiously Quakers, I believe. Now, obviously, when I say conservative, I don't mean conservative in all ways. Okay, my understanding of Rosemary and the family is that they're kind of upper middle class. They are active religiously, and that she did not approve of some of the things he was doing, and very likely Syd's mother did not either. So Syd would not have been telling a lot of these things to his family, a lot of the stories that are part of his life, because they would not have approved. And there are a lot of people that are from conservative families that know very well what that is like. Okay? So Syd's living this kind of life as a pop star. Who knows what all the stories are, but very likely Rosemary is not going to know all those stories. And if she did hear some of them, she's not going to like them, and she's not going to want to have them discussed a lot. And you can't blame her for that, because she loved her brother. It's known that they were very close together when they were young. They basically came up together. There's more brothers and sisters in the family. I don't know how many, but Rosemary and Syd were always close growing up. And she's his younger sister, and she has quite a few kind of funny stories about him. But there are going to be aspects of Syd's background and his history that she is not going to like. And if she's contributing heavily to this film, and you need her cooperation for the film, I'm not sure that all those stories are going to get in here for that reason. It's not easy to make everyone happy when you put together something like this. There's a reason why they say too many chefs spoil a stew. Because you try to start making everybody happy, and before you know it, at the end, you've got dinner that doesn't taste very good. He also then thanks the Thorgerson group, and I haven't really discussed Storm Thorgerson. I guess, okay, so let's discuss Storm Thorgerson really quick, and perhaps I shouldn't make it too quick. I'll admit, I don't know a whole lot about Storm Thorgerson, okay? I know he basically has an art background, to my knowledge. He kind of was brought in and was one of the founding members of Hypnosis. Now, one of the books that I cited discussed how Hypnosis is written on a wall somewhere on like Cromwell Road, I think, which is one of the places Syd was staying early on that was just absolutely inundated with artists and the counterculture. So how far back that goes and whose idea was it, I don't know. But it is interesting how Storm Thorgerson's designs kind of correlate to the music. He was involved with Led Zeppelin. He was involved with Peter Gabriel and Genesis. A lot of the album covers, unfortunately, all this artwork is now gone. It's hardly ever in the music industry, which bothers me a lot because all these things kind of contribute to make a really wonderful product, a really wonderful experience. You know, the vinyl, the album design, the radios, discussions about the music, people contributing, learning how to play guitar and figure all these things out. It's a lot like working on a Harley Davidson. I don't know if you like motorcycles, but motorcycles used to be pretty easy to work on. And over time, they get more complicated. And as they get more complicated, it's more difficult for regular people to work on them. So that removes, and I understand, like, that's one thing to say is happening with technology. But it's another thing to say that with art. And really, that's what music is to me. It's an art form. So it's meant to be handled by people. It's meant to be created by people. And it's meant to be experienced as much as possible by people. And one of the ways that you can experience it is by trying to make it. And if you do so, then you'll see things that you wouldn't see. You'll hear things you wouldn't hear. You'll feel things that you wouldn't feel if you've never held a guitar and played a guitar and felt the vibration of the music through your body and sang with it at the same time. You're not going to know what that experience is like and how wonderful that is, how wonderfully expressive that is. And by the way, how much you miss it if you give it up. Just saying. If you know anybody that likes to play guitar and sing and they have to put it down for like a month, it's not easy to do. So, anyway, I was talking about Storm Thorgerson. Kind of got off topic there. So he helped design a lot of the covers he comes up with. The stories that I understand, is they would ask him to come up with covers, and they'd have basic ideas. He'd go take pictures or make designs, and he'd show up with a group of designs or photos, and then they would pick. And he did pick or put together the prism for Dark Side of the Moon. And it's funny because, that's so similar to the first album, Piper at the Gates of Dawn, where we have these reflections of images. There's a Syd Barrett connection right there. The next thing that they mention is Jenny Spires kind of helped connect them with a bunch of people and helped remind Storm of a lot of stories.
I want to thank Jenny Spires, who prodded Storm's memories through the whole process and connected us with a lot of people for the film.
There are so many people that are part of these stories. It's really hard to say, who should they have contacted. I hope that they tried to get as many stories as possible. And there are people that I hope that they talked to, I hope they talked to Iggy. Did they? I suspect that they won't. I hope they talked to Libby. I don't know that they will. I think Libby had a profound impact on Syd. I don't know. I don't know what else to say about that. But I would be sad if there were people that were left out that I feel quite likely had a big effect on Syd. And one of those people would definitely be Libby. And if she's not in there, then that's a mistake, in my opinion. Okay, so the next thing is Storm apparently said to Roddy, well, maybe you're the one, to actually make the film.
One thing that everybody said about this film was that this is the one.
I don't know much about Roddy Bogawa. I will say I like him at first glance. I'm not really familiar with his work, so I don't want to say too much. There are things about him that I like and things I don't like. I'll kind of mention those as we go along. The next thing that they say is Gail Opinion kind of let him take pictures of the engagement ring. She had 2 engagement rings.
Gail Opinion, who I just met, who I've lived with her in the interviews for quite some time, she loaned us her 2 engagement rings. Lent us, I would say, to shoot. So you see the engagement rings.
I don't know what to make of that. I don't know how much people know about one another in life. I'm married now. I've been married for a while. I dated some people. I won't say how many. But I can't name a single woman that I dated, or even my wife, that could tell you what I was working on with work. Not everybody's like me. I understand that, but you have to understand some people compartmentalize their life. They only show you what they want you to see. And I feel sometimes that that's how Syd was. And I hope that they pull people from all these different aspects of his life so we get as much different opinion about him as possible, because he's so varied as a person. You need to have someone that is familiar with the religious background, and he knew some people that were in San Juan. You need to have people that are from the music background, and they do. So I feel that will be covered pretty well. You need to have people in there that are from an art background. I don't know how many there are. I bet you there are. There need to be people that are familiar with film and photography. Roddy Bogawa is familiar with those, so I think he'll be able to cover that. Do they have poets? Do they speak with like English professors? Do they discuss this with that? There's a wonderful, I believe he was an English professor who broke down Syd's song, The Octopus. And I mean, did they interview him for this so that they understand the depth of the poetry of that song? Are they going? Man, if they don't do that, that's really unfortunate. They need to discuss things with his family. They did. So we know that they've got that in the film. That's great. And they also need to discuss things with, like, his girlfriends, his intimate, close relations. And they do to some degree. I don't know, really, how much each of them knew aspects of Syd. You know, I don't know how much he shared. I think he was kind of a closed-off person. And, I mean, for good or bad, I think that's just kind of how he was. They do mention having photos of Abbey Road sessions for Shine On You Crazy Diamond that haven't been previously released. I'm looking forward to that.
Phil Taylor, who's here, who you'll see some photos from Syd's visit to Abbey Road during the Shine On sessions that have never been seen.
They do thank the David Gilmour, Nick Mason, and Syd Barrett estates for input and photos and stuff, and I'm very interested to see what they have there.
And I do have to thank the band. I have to thank Roger, David, and Nick, and Syd's estate and family for that. They've all been very generous.
It becomes quite clear that Bogawa kind of says this is dedicated to Storm. I think it's great that he and Storm put this together.
And finally, do you have to say that there's a presence that's missing? Sorry. Which is Storm.
I think it's a wonderful blessing that Storm did kind of help put things together. And I don't really know exactly how much was known by Storm about Mr. Barrett. Was he just a periphery kind of friend? Did Syd call him sometimes? Did he talk with Syd on the phone? There was this thing called a phone that, landline. You could travel by telephone, as Mr. Barrett said, and you could talk with people. And how many people were conversing with Syd by telephone? We'll never know. But I'm sure there were a lot of interesting conversations happening. We get the egg breakfast story.
And we were at breakfast the next morning, and Storm and I were eating eggs, and he said, "Roddy, so what the fuck do you know about Syd Barrett?" Had a halfway bite of eggs, and I said, "Well," and I told him a story about how when I was in college, my band tried to learn Syd Barrett songs, and we could never figure them out.
With Storm and Roddy, and he's kind of saying that Roddy says that he was playing with his band and they kind of couldn't figure out some Syd songs, but Syd seemed honest and modern. I think that's a great description. And right there, you find out that Roddy is involved with music, and so I like him more. I like him more now. Not only is he discussing and showing a human side in his friendship and his camaraderie with Storm Thorgerson, but he also is someone who's interested in music and has tried to play music. So I think I like that he'll have all those aspects tied to him. I don't know how much he knows about Syd, and I don't know how much he really researched everything. He said he kind of started reading about Syd and he took in as much information as he could. But there are different ways of reading and looking at things, and so I hope he kept an open mind and he tried to understand things well. So the next thing is Roddy kind of mentions that there was no personal story about Syd, nothing really from his point of view, and I have to agree. I don't think anything really has been made, either because Syd didn't want it, or because it wasn't popular, or perhaps because nobody wanted to hear it.
And I realized there hadn't been really a personal story done about Syd. And so I came back to Storm and I said, okay, I see a story here that's quite interesting.
Because the other stories are so exciting, I do feel a lot of times that's part of the reason why I made my Peeling Syd story series, was to try and relate things maybe from his point of view, as far as I could figure it out. And I hope that that's kind of what they're going to do with the film. And I hope it does revive interest in Syd, because he is extraordinarily gifted, in my opinion. I don't know exactly what was intended with everything, and I clearly don't understand aspects of him as well as some other people might. I don't think anyone fully understands Mr. Barrett. And anyway, I appreciate that he has tried to put this together with Storm Thorgerson, and I hope it's not too late. And I hope that people, and by too late I mean I hope that there's still enough interest in Pink Floyd and Syd Barrett that that people will go see it. I mean, there's so many bad films now. It seems like the film industry's kind of just fallen off. So I hope the film does well, because it deserves to do well. But more importantly, people need to see this and understand this about Syd, because it's such a large part of the world now. I feel there's a movement back towards what the 60s were trying to accomplish but never really got right. Maybe because drugs got in the way, or maybe because it was just too hard, or maybe it just wasn't time yet. I don't know. But I do feel that there's kind of a rebirth that's coming soon. And people will be able to embrace their spirituality and the artists within themselves, and also be logical people, and hopefully live meaningful lives. I feel that's coming back around, that it'll become prioritized again. I hope I'm right. Anyway, I suspect that will be tied within this film. That theme, that moral, that there's more to life than just working kind of a specific type of job and paying the bills, and not developing your own humanity and your own spirituality. He also mentions that Storm just kind of calls him one time and he says, okay, we're going to be in LA, we're going to be doing interviews, and he's starting shooting, which is funny.
He literally called me up one day, as Storm did. Many of you guys might know this. He called me up and he said, I'm in Los Angeles. We're going to shoot some interviews tomorrow. Are you coming?
But I actually really like that. And the reason I like that is because it shows that he's allowing contributions and development by other people. And that is the mark of someone who is secure in their work and someone who recognizes the value of other people. That they have contributions that you will not understand and be able to replicate. And he's allowing Storm to do so. He's allowing Storm to help create this. And whenever I work with anyone, if I'm coaching, like if I help coach tennis, and I've helped a number of coaches coach high school level tennis. And whenever I meet a coach and he tells me he doesn't want me there, I already know the guy's not a good coach, because that's almost always the reaction of a bad coach. Now, a good coach will say, okay, well, what can you do? And, whatever. They'll kind of figure out what they want to have you do. But they'll make an assessment based on kind of what they see. And they'll welcome a kind of a tit-for-tat conversation. Normally, they'll have a collection of coaches. Imagine that. A democratic process almost, where people communicate and contribute. And in the end, you may be able to reach a kid and help a kid out that they couldn't, either because the kid has a bias against that particular coach, or because his demeanor doesn't match well. There's all kinds of kids. Some kids like to be, they really need a lot of enthusiastic support. Nothing but positives. If you get negative with them at all, they'll just fall apart. And some kids really react to you kind of pushing them and egging them on, Well, that guy looks like he thinks he can beat you. That kind of statement, that'll really rub some kids wrong, and you'll get the best you can out of them. And they'll kind of look at it and they'll be like, yeah, he does. I bet he does think he can beat me. Anyway, coaching is a funny thing. It's kind of a mind game, but making art and putting together stuff like this is also a mind game. And if you get a bunch of different points of view, it really makes it wonderful. So I like that aspect. I don't know Roddy Bogawa, but that story right there makes me think I like him. The final thing is, in that particular intro, he mentions interviewing Mick Rock.
Okay. I did some of the interviews in New York with Mick Rock, late Mick Rock, who's great.
Okay, and Mick Rock is one of the last interviews that there was with Syd. I believe that was with Rolling Stone magazine or something. I don't know. Anyway, Mick Rock and Syd had kind of an affiliation. Very likely their personalities are similar. But I do not know how much Mick Rock knew him. I really don't. I mean, you can read the interviews. I don't know how much is going on the side, but the conversations seem a little bit, I don't know. They seem a little bit superficial to me sometimes. I like that, as I said, I like that Jenny Spires is in there. I think she's someone that knows Syd pretty well. She knew him for a long time. She also knew quite a few of his friends. Okay, so let's do the last interview, and we'll see what kind of comes up there. And this is posted by Deepest Dream, I think is what it's called. Anyway, I'll give the information for the video here. And basically, he's being kind of podcast interviewed. Roddy Bogawa is again. Okay, so the first thing they mention is that there's like a 3.5 hour edit, and I'm like, yes.
No, you're right. I mean, at one point there was about a 3.5 hour edit.
I want all of that. I want 3.5. I want a 5 hour edit. I want everything. So I know not everybody's like that, and some people want to be entertained. Are you not entertained? But I want as much information as I can get. And If you're a Syd fan, you'll know why. It's because there's just been this dearth of information about the guy. He's so successfully just kind of disconnected from everything. So I do have a concern now, and the next thing that he kind of mentions is that they kind of had a list of interviews they wanted to do and stories that they wanted to prove or disprove.
Storm and I at one point made a big laundry list of people we wanted to interview, and then also stories that we wanted to prove or disprove. So
I do not like that. And the reason I don't like that should be pretty obvious to you. If it's not, I'll explain. If you're going to make something that is fair, I don't think you should go into it with a loaded mindset. I mean, obviously, if you want to prove or disprove something using the scientific method and having a theory, then by all means, But you can't really prove or disprove anything that involves a story. Do you know what I mean? So you can get information from some people, but you're not going to know something really factually. I mean, this is like social sciences level stuff. If somebody says something is true, just as an example, okay? Just as an example. Some people think that Syd was heavily involved with the drug counterculture, and some people think he was not at all. That he was not at all involved. So who's right? I mean, I've seen that statement from two different points of view that are totally different. So how do you prove or disprove something like that? You only need one person to say the opposite, and you only have like so many people that have an opinion on the topic that actually is an educated, experienced opinion with someone. So it's just a little bit odd to me. I don't know what they mean by things that they want to prove or disprove. Stories they want to prove or disprove. I don't know what to make of that. It seems a little bit biased, which concerns me. Okay, next, they kind of mention interviewing the sister and some girlfriends, and they specifically mention Gail Opinion.
Interview his sister and some girlfriends that haven't been in other things like that. And so we did try and do kind of a little bit of a more intimate kind of relationship to different people.
Well, no, actually, he doesn't specifically say her there. So I'm not sure who the girlfriends are. I really want to know if they interviewed Iggy. And one of the reasons for that is because something happened with Iggy when she walked in on David Gilmour and Syd listening to an album after Syd and Iggy had kind of had a falling out. And so eventually Syd, she gets notified or whatever that, don't try to contact Syd anymore, just leave him alone. What album was that? Because if you know the time frames, you can go watch my Peeling Syd and Did Syd. The time frame is odd. And I want to say that was the soundtrack for a film. And why is Syd kind of sneaking around and listening to that album with David Gilmour? It's kind of suspicious, And Iggy has that story, so it'd be nice to have some clarification. And like I said, we need to hear from Libby. She was, I feel, very tied to his art. And I think she was very tied to his awakening as kind of like this, as a romantic, as a poet. I think a lot of what he made was impacted by some people, and he was writing to certain people. And I think sometimes he was writing to Libby. Just my opinion. The next thing I guess I'll kind of mention is that he then repeats that egg story with Storm Thurgeson for breakfast, and that's just irritating to me. I do not like when people have this kind of repetitive nature. I mean, granted, it's a different setting with a different person, but I mean, this is like the other video was like 8 minutes, and then this video is like 15 minutes.
And so literally the next morning at breakfast, Storm and I were sitting there, and he said, "What do you know about Syd Barrett, Roddy?" He put me on the spot.
It makes me think that you don't have much to talk about. Because if you really, really are familiar with a topic or a person, you can talk about so many subtle, nuanced things that the probability of repetition is extremely low. You just kind of just go off on a tangent, and you'll give all these little side story details, and before you know it, you're totally on a whole nother path that lasts for like 5 minutes. And granted, I mean, he's trying to relay what he can in the format that is consumable by the people that the audience that he's trying to reach. I get that, but also I'm nervous that he's repeating that story. He mentions that this film may be kind of like Storm trying to say goodbye to some folks.
That's how it started, and I realized one of the emotional things that I realized, was this idea of, going to see old friends, talking about a long lost friend, Syd. But then I also realized Storm was saying goodbye to everybody too. So,
which I think is really cool. I also think that it is very valuable that, how can I put this? There's two ways to go. People can choose to be selfish and just kind of disappear. Maybe they get angry. Maybe they treat people poorly. Or you can choose to be productive and creative and make the world a better place as long as you can. And I think it says a lot about Storm that he obviously was considering that. He was diagnosed with cancer, as Roddy mentions, and he chose to keep working. He chose to keep doing the things he could to relay stories about people that he cared about. He tried to make things of beauty that would improve the world. And just like Syd's father, who continued working while he was dying of cancer, Storm Thorgerson continued working and making things of value for other people. Didn't seem to get... I'm sure he had bad moments, but I mean, it's just admirable that there are people like that. And it's unfortunate that people don't get to see more from people like that in the world. People that are kind of suffering gallantly. I'll call it that. Suffering gallantly. Okay, so Roddy kind of relays a story that he suggested that people that maybe hadn't seen Syd since they were like teenagers would maybe write him a letter.
I mean, one of the questions that I asked people was if you could write a letter to Syd, because many of these people hadn't seen him since they were 16 or 17, and they just read about him or heard stories. And so I said, if you could write a letter to Syd, what would you say to him now?
And what would they say? Interesting idea. I like that. I like that kind of angle. I'm not sure. Again, now my concern is like who, which people, as many as possible from those 7 different areas that I kind of mentioned is what I would like to see. Roddy also mentions that he sees the film as a trigger to kind of wake up people, wake them up in their self, and bring out things in people.
And I always hope my films function as triggers like that. That there's the content of the movie, the subjects, and so forth. But also, I hope that people come away and they start thinking about themselves in relationship to those stories.
And I like that. I like that a lot because I think that's kind of what Syd was doing. I think that's what the music was doing. It was trying to wake people up and try to show them like how to be better, how to make the world a more beautiful place, that you can help create things, you can do these things. I like that story. That makes me think again that Roddy is somewhat insightful to the nature of the music. They also mentioned the 3.5 cut. Who would watch that?
Roddy, I'm just a viewer. I'm amateurish, but I really enjoyed your documentary. It stands as is with its running time. Whenever you said like 3.5 hour cut, I'm like, I could watch that immediately. How viable is that? I mean, I'm just wondering about that cut. I just, because I love it as is, but
I would. The interviewer here kind of mentions that, and that's my favorite question. Is he mentions this 3.5 hour cut that would be great, and I'm like, yeah, I think that would be great too. I want to see all of it. I want to see every single minute of footage from every single person, and I'll never get to. But man, there are people that you meet sometimes where you think, I wish I would have talked to them a little bit more. People obviously, this isn't about me, but I mean I've had the good fortune to know some older people, many of whom are artists, and just recently some more passed away. and they're really, really wonderful people. So I feel like there's this kind of a age divide, particularly in the United States. I don't know if this is true everywhere, but particularly in the United States, a lot of older folks just kind of go live in communities, old folks communities, old folks homes, and it's really a shame. Other cultures, you have like 2 or 3 generations in a house, and you can get a lot of input from the other generations. And in a way, I was lucky. I spent quite a bit of time with my grandma when I was growing up for various reasons, and I got to see the world through her eyes, and it was a very enlightening experience. So anyway, the point is, I think that it's good to see things from other people's point of view. The more, the better. The next thing Roddy kind of says is that he decided he couldn't chronologically kind of put things together, like where Syd was when, and the moves, and also the music wasn't chronological. And I totally agree with that.
Because it was real, we were kind of trying to follow the timeline too closely. And the minute that I there was a point where I said, okay, forget it. There's just no way we can follow it. And I also did that with the music. I said, let's not use the music chronologically. Let's use the music as feeling, as emotion and tone.
I think that's absolutely enlightened, and I think that is correct. And part of the reason for that is because I do not think Syd was making his music and releasing it chronologically. So, for example, one of the later songs he released was Effervescing Elephant. In my opinion, that is clearly a song about his father and his experience with yoga and spirituality and other things. It's all in that song. That is an incredibly deep song. You can watch Peeling Syd, Effervescing Elephant. I'm not sure which episode it is. I'll put it up here. But that song is an incredibly important song. It's obvious he was working on that for a very long time. And it's discussing very specific points in his life and his relationship with his father, in my opinion. Okay? So that isn't something that you would just throw in there chronologically. It doesn't make sense. It has to be tied with this kind of flow of life. And I like that. I think Roddy Bogawa seems to get that. They then kind of mentioned Ozu, this other filmmaker. I'm not familiar with him, but he does mention this idea of engaging the audience and having them have kind of an emotional response to what's being presented. Again, perfect. That is the nature of art. Roddy Bogawa understands that, and I hope the film will do so as well. So, I'll just ask a few questions or make a few statements here to end everything. And then I'll end. The first is that nobody really knows, okay, including me. Nobody knows. You can have opinions. Everyone has opinions, but everyone is kind of jaded by their experience and what they see. I'll remind you that supposedly Jesus Christ had brothers and sisters and family, and they kind of didn't really totally get what he was doing. He was known to hang out with people that were below him. They were undesirables in society. So who really knows this guy, you know? And please don't think that I'm trying to say that Syd is like Jesus, but I will say that I think he hung out with a lot of different people. And not all of those people got along with one another. So they will not view each other in the same way, and they will not have the same respect for each other. They will not understand that aspects of Syd are tied to all these different people. I think he actually was a very affable individual. I think he was very affable. I think he was able to see things from a lot of different points of view. I think he was able to relate to a lot of different people. I think it's in his music, it's in his humanity, and I don't think everyone else can understand that. So understand, please, that when you watch the film, you're getting points of view from the people that are related, and I have to do the same thing, and I have my own point of view. But I hope that they capture objectively Syd's point of view, possibly as well as it can be captured. That's one of my hopes. Another hope I have is that they actually try to tie the art to specific songs, which is something that I kind of wanted to do. There are a number of works of art that I believe are very specifically tied to art forms. You can go through the Peeling Syd series. I tried to tie as many of them to Syd songs as I could, but there's enough of them there to make a pattern, and I really think it was happening. So, just as an example, okay, Rosemary considers Syd to be an artist, and I agree. I don't know that she understands his art to connect to his music, and that the music is also an aspect of his art. She understands that his visual art is art. Does the family, does she, does everyone, does this film consider the possibility that he's doing all these things at once, and how profound that is? And they go through and try and tie things to Syd. One of the last things that Syd made, I believe, is a watercolor still life with lemons, I think, which very likely, in my opinion, ties in with the song Baby Lemonade. And there's a reason for that. Again, I discussed that, I think, in the Baby Lemonade song, the Peeling Syd about Baby Lemonade. Okay. The other thing is that I do consider the work outside, or the work possibilities after leaving Pink Floyd. And of course, he lived in Cambridge, I guess at his mom's old house. What's he doing there all the time? He is a worker. His father was a worker. He's an artist and a worker. Obviously, he made some art, and how much of it he burned, I don't know. If you read Grapefruit, that's one of the things Yoko Ono says is make things and then burn them. Take photo and burn them. But how much art did he really make? And do you believe that he didn't keep playing guitar? Rosemary herself admits in one of those books that she sometimes would walk in and he would be playing guitar and he would stop. And she would say, "Oh, that's quite nice. What is that?" But he wouldn't respond. He wouldn't clarify what it was. So he's hiding things. He's innately hiding things. Why? I have no idea why someone would want to hide so many aspects of who they are. Other than it's just a habit. Perhaps it's just a habit for someone that really doesn't want the world to understand them. It doesn't want to be understood and doesn't want to be seen. Why that's the case, I don't know. One thing, I guess, that I'll kind of mention is that they don't really mention Rick Wright, which is unfortunate, because Rick Wright, I think, for a time, was the member of the band. Before David Gilmour joined, I believe Rick Wright was the one that was closest with Syd. And so I don't know how close he was with Syd. I really don't. I don't know how much Syd was showing him. But it would be nice to have some information about Rick Wright there. And I've seen Edgerton's interview with Rick Wright, and honestly, I'm not sure that they were all that close. But still, it would be nice to hear things from Rick Wright and see what he has to say. So the final thought is, like I said, I would really, really like to see what David Gilmour thinks. I don't know how to say this any more clearly. I really honestly believe that David Gilmour is the key to understanding Syd Barrett. I think he's well aware of the dynamics of the family. He's well aware of the dynamics of the music industry. He's well aware of what projects Syd may or may not have been working on, or at least perhaps he has an inkling to them. And I believe, since he worked with Syd the most on the solo albums, that he is quite aware of Syd musically and what he was capable of. And so I really wish that David Gilmour would put together all his ideas. And if he doesn't want to make money off of it, because I think he wouldn't want to make money off of it, then just donate the money. But make the book. Make something. I would really love to see what David Gilmour has to say. The last thing I'll say is that I'm really excited for the film. I hope it's good. I hope they keep their minds open to various points of view and possibilities with Syd, because I think he was a genius, definitely a poet of genius. I think he was a synthetic genius with music, and he could be a little bit odd, of course. And who knows, I honestly don't know. I've read the material. I honestly don't know how affected or impacted he was by illicit drug use. But I do think that he's extraordinary regardless. So I'm very excited for the film. And I guess, I'm a little bit jealous. I wish I could have worked on something like this. I wish I could have participated the way that Roddy Bogawa got to participate in in meeting all these people, all these really extraordinary people, in my opinion. It's funny, he mentioned spending money and to make a product, and we all think how valuable money is, and he seems to recognize that the experience and the product of making this is worth more than money. And I think, yeah, it's worth way more than money. The fact that he got to meet with all these people and participate in their life story and make a work of art that's tied to such a really profound individual. I think he's quite blessed. And I think he knows that. I think he knows how blessed he is. So anyway, those are my thoughts. My next video, when I do put this together, will be about the film. Whether I have to buy it or I actually get to go see it in a movie theater somewhere, which I kind of doubt. But I'm going to watch it if I can. And then I'll give everybody a rundown of the film, my thoughts on the film. All for now. I'll talk to you later. There will be shoulders pressing in the hall, and I won't know if you're here at all. There will be wine and drinking in the yard. There won't be anybody very hard. There will be lots of things that we can do, and all and more will be for you. Everything I knew I tried with you, but everything to you was never easy. So I went ahead around my world, saw the things you do, driving by your side, see you looking too. And I know, I never lied to you. It's been just like you're gone for just one day, for so long. It's been so hard to bear with you not there. But though I think of you, the things you do when I'm with you, to be with you, to be alone, can only think why I'm here, what's meant to be.